So you want to be a mage in Oblivion? I got you. Here's a complete guide. For picking the best race for a mage, there are mainly two options, and those are the High Elf and the Breton. For active effects, Bretons start off with a magic bonus of 50 points. In addition to that, they have a 50% resistance to magic to start. On top of that, they also start off with the greater power of the dragon skin, which gives a 50% shield for a minute. This is the equivalent of a level 100 or master level alteration spell, so it's good to have at the start of the game. On the other hand, there are the High Elves. They give a bigger initial magicka bonus of 100 points instead of 50. As well, they have a 75% resistance to disease to start. However, that comes at the cost of a 25% weakness to all elemental magic. The other races in the game do not have magicka bonuses like these two, so these two are definitely your best options for a mage character. Here on screen I have all of the racial differences side by side. I will note that most of these bonuses will become more obsolete towards the end game, depending on your enchantments and gear. I'll cover that in a later section. Right now, I'm not going to recommend one over the other before we cover birth signs. So let's go right into that. For birth signs, you have three main options. Those are the mage, the apprentice, and the atronach. I'm going to skip the first two for now. We'll come back to those later. I've already made a video on the atronach, but essentially it gives you a 150 point magicka bonus, as well as 50% spell absorption. However, you lose all magicka regeneration. Simplify, you're going to need to use things like potions, absorb magicka spells and enchantments, Welkin stones to regenerate your magicka. I would also recommend using a weapon in case you run out of magicka. It's a lot of work, however, that 50% spell absorption and that 150 point bonus are very, very good. If you're up for the task, then go for it. Now back to the other two birth signs. The mage just gives a bonus of 50 points to magicka with no strings attached, no debuffs. On the other hand, the apprentice gives a 100-point bonus, however, it gives you a 100% weakness to magic. This effectively means you take double the amount of magic damage. Now, I wanted to see how the apprentice would intersect with the resistances and weaknesses given by the races, so I ran my own experiment. All at level 1, all at the same enemy. I would fast travel to Kvatch, get hit with a fireball by a weak scamp or the stunted scamp. All at level 1, all the same class. The only thing I would change is the race and the birth sign. Here are the results of my experiment on screen. Here I have trials with the Breton, the High Elf, and then as a control slash baseline, the Imperial, all with the Apprentice, and then just the Mage as a control. First thing I noticed was that a Breton Apprentice lost 9 points of health, while a High Elf Mage lost 7 points of health. Now, both of those characters would start with a 150 point bonus to Magicka. However, you're going to take more damage as a Breton Apprentice than as a High Elf Mage. So I'm actually going to rule out this combination because you're better off just picking a High Elf Mage at that point. This was a tough pill to swallow because the character that I have the most time on in this game is a Breton Apprentice, but it is what it is. That's why I'm making this video, so you guys can choose more wisely than I did. The next thing I noticed was that a High Elf Apprentice took 15 points of damage compared to the Breton Mage only taking 3 points. So you're taking 5 times as much damage as a High Elf Apprentice than as a Breton Mage. Now, this isn't inherently a bad thing. However, you just have to know that you're going to be a glass cannon. You're going to have a large magic bonus of 200 points to start. However, you're going to take the most damage out of all of these. Even compared to a baseline Imperial that's 2.5 times more damage from magic as a high elf apprentice. Like I said, you can go for it. However, you have to really make sure that you have good enchantments and that you're not dying. I would say it's more feasible on a lower difficulty. However, if you're at a higher difficulty, I'm not sure that I would recommend it because you will be for choosing a class for your mage character. I would not recommend picking any of the preset ones in my opinion. I would just recommend creating a custom one. For example, here we have the mage, and for the purposes of this video, I'm not going to go too in depth, but Oblivion has something called the leveling problem, where essentially you see these major skills. Every time you level up a major skill, you get a point towards your character level. And every time you level up, you're able to get attribute bonuses. So to your strength, endurance, agility. However, the magnitude of those bonuses is controlled by how much you level up your minor skills, or your skills that are not your major skills, are not responsible for leveling you up. So it is possible that someone could not level up their minor skills enough and they level up too fast, and that means that their character is going to be underdeveloped. You're not going to get as many attribute bonus points. There are better resources out there, however, there's a quick rundown. For example, here the mage, with its major skills as all of the fields of magic. If you're using only magic, then you are going to get very, very low attribute bonuses. You're going to level up too quick and you're going to be underdeveloped in the long run. So I'd recommend creating a custom class. Specialization does not particularly matter as long as you select your major skills properly. So you could go with magic here to get the increase in skill level up. Two favorite attributes. If you watch my video on Oblivion character creation, you'll know that endurance and luck are the two best to pick overall if you want to get the absolute most out of your character. However, I can understand that someone would want a bonus to intelligence or willpower because they are a magic build, in which case you could go with intelligence for the major skills. How I would personally do it is I would pick a couple of magic classes that you're going to be using. However, I would not put them all. So for example, restoration, because Restoration is a good magic class to start off with. It's probably the most versatile and the most fundamental to the game. If you don't plan on using Conjuration much, then I would actually set it as a major skill because it's very easy to level up. It's the easiest magic class to level up. However, if you're going to use it a lot, then that means that you're going to be leveling up a lot. And we don't want to level up too fast. So now that you have picked your 1, 2, 3 magic classes that you're going to be using to level up passively. The next 4 to 6 skills that we're going to pick are going to be ones that we want to level up in a controlled manner and ones that we're not going to be using as much. Because we don't want to level up too fast, we want to be able to level up our minor skills before we level up so we can get the most attribute bonuses, like I previously mentioned. A good start for this is to first of all determining if you are going to be using a weapon, which I do recommend that you do because it is good to fall back on a weapon if you run out of magicka or become silenced. However, if you do not want to use a weapon, that is your call. If you do plan on using a weapon, then I would not recommend picking that as a major skill. I would pick all of the other ones. Let's assume for this character that I'm going to use hand to hand as my backup. I would not pick hand to hand as major skills. I would pick blunt, blade, and marksman. Next up, a good skill to pick is alchemy because it's very easy to farm ingredients and you can create potions whenever you want and level up in a controlled manner. I pick this for most of my characters. Another good choice would be armorer, although I would recommend including this as one of your classes that you're going to level up throughout the game passively because you're going to have to repair items at some point unless you want to pay every single time at a merchant. The reason I like picking this is because you have to be level 50 to be able to repair enchanted items. So if you have enchanted armor, you're not going to be able to use it for long if you're below armor or level 50. So this is one that I would pick for the initial bonus. If you know that your character is going to have a specific armor preference, then I would pick the one that you're not going to be using. So for example, if I'm going to be using heavy armor, then I would select light armor as a major skill. However, if you're just going to be using whatever armor, depending on the enchantments or whatever's best, then I would not recommend picking either of these. If you don't plan on sneaking much, this is a good one to pick. If you plan on using illusion to charm people, and you're not going to be using speechcraft as much, then I would recommend selecting this one. This one's also very easy to level up. You just have to spam click in the minigame. Now that we're done with classes, we're going to go to magical stones. All magical stones in the game can only be activated at nighttime. There are two types of magical stones in Oblivion. The first kind are named after the birth signs in the game, and these powers can only be held one at a time. They are all mutually exclusive with each other. I will put the link on screen for the Elder Scrolls Wiki article that goes over these if you'd like a more in-depth explanation. However, our first stone that we have right here is the Atronach stone. Here's its location on the map. This gives us the Arcane Well power. Here the Arcane Well gives us 30 points of spell absorption for 2 minutes, as well as a 10-point bonus to intelligence. Next up, here we have the Lady Stone. This gives us the Lady's Warding power. This is going to give us fortification of endurance and willpower. The third stone that I'm going to recommend is the Mage Stone. It is located right here on the map. This gives us the Magicka Manifold power, which gives a bonus of 50 Magicka for 2 minutes. If you'd like to find more magical stones like these, you can check out the article that I previously put on screen. The next kinds of magical stones I'll be covering are ones that you can activate and then you will permanently have the power. They are not mutually exclusive with any other powers. These ones are not named after the birth signs. First one I'm going to recommend here, this is the Aetherius Stone. This gives the Gates of Aetherius power. This gives a bonus of 50 points to Magicka for 2 minutes, as well as a 20% resistance to magic. This one requires that you at least have a combined 20 Fame and Infamy. That is another thing with all of these stones, is that they have Fame and Infamy requirements. Next up is the Magnus Stone. This requires a combined 50 Fame and Infamy. It is located here on the map. This gives the Skein of Magnus power. This fortifies every magic skill, including alchemy, for 15 points for 2 minutes. Next up, we have the Shazar Stone. This requires 60 combined Fame and Infamy. Here is its location on the map. This gives the Shield of Shazar power. Although this one mainly gives bonuses to warrior skills, it is still good for the 10% spell reflection. The final stone I'm going to recommend is the Dragon Stone. This requires 70 Fame and Infamy. This gives the Dragon Dream power, which fortifies Magicka for 50 points, health for 40 points, and fatigue for 100 points, all for 2 minutes. If you would like to have all the powers, then please check out the link that I posted. Next up, I'm going to cover gear and which specific effects would be best for a mage. The first effect I'm going to cover is spell absorption. Here on this character, I have 105 points of spell absorption. That means every spell that I get hit with, I take no damage and I absorb all of the magicka from it. Here is one of my personal favorite items, is one of the best items in the game. This is the Sorcerer's Ring. This gives 25 points of spell absorption, as well as 25 points of magic. This is just random loot that you can find out in the game. Next up, there are the Magebane Greaves for Daedric armor, and for glass armor, the Greaves of Purity. I do not have the Greaves of Purity on this character, but I do have the Magebane Greaves, as you can see here. These give 20 points of spell absorption. Next up is the Spelldrinker Amulet. This can be acquired through the Mages Guild quest line. However, it is a leveled item. To get the best enchantment on this, you need to be level 30 or above, and that is 26 points of spell absorption. Here you can see mine only has 12 points, which means I got it at too low of a level. Alternatively, there's the Amulet of Absorption, which is random loot. This gives 20 points of spell absorption. Then finally, we have custom enchanted armor. The way you can make these custom enchantments with spell absorption for 15 points are through Gates to Oblivion, the Transcendent Sigil Stones. The Transcendent Sigil Stones that you need to capture to close the Oblivion gates will have enchantments on them, which you can use to enchant your gear. So for me, I have 4 items that all have 15 points of spell absorption on them. If you pick the Atronach Birthsign, then you already start off with 50 points of spell absorption. In this case, you will only need a couple of these items to reach 100%. The next effect I'll be covering are Fortify Magicka enchantments. We've already covered the Sorcerer's Ring. Through an enchanting table with Grand Soul Gems with Grand Souls, or Black Soul Gems with Grand Souls, the maximum amount of points you can get is 24. However, there are Transcendent Sigil Stones in the game from Gates to Oblivion that can give up to 50 points of Magicka. So if I were a mage, I would hold off on completing the main quest so you can clear every single gate to Oblivion. Next up, I'm going to be covering items that have the Reflect Spell enchantment. Here is one right here, the Alien Crown of Nenalata. This is acquired through Umbakano's quest. This is also a leveled item. Your character needs to be level 25 or above to get the best version, which is right here. This reflects spell 25%. In addition to that, there are several other items that offer reflect spell, such as this Amulet of Reflection as random loot. There is also, to the lesser extent, the Grand Amulet of Reflection for some reason. I feel like those names should be swapped. Next up is the Mundane Ring. This reflects 35% on self with a 50% resistance to magic. The Ring of Namira, Ring of Sunfire through a quest. This is also a leveled item. The Shield of Reflection, which you can just find out in the world. And then the Spellbreaker, which is much better through Periite's quest, which reflects 30%. And as usual, we of course have to cover the reflected damage items. First one being the Escutcheon of Coral. This is through a specific quest that you find in Coral after you help 2 twins. Make sure to side with the Countess of Coral to get this. This is also a leveled item. You need to be level 25 or above to get this version, which reflects 35% of damage. Next up are 2 random loot items you'll find out in the world. The first one being the Necklace of Swords. There is also the Amulet of Axes that instead gives a fortification to blunt, and the Ring of the Iron Fist. That is going to be it for the video today. I hope you all enjoyed. I hope you all learned something new, and I hope it all helps you with your mage characters on Oblivion. Make sure to check out some of my other videos, like and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the flip side.